So, let me introduce the panel, the very distinguished panel we have. And on my immediate left is Tony Blair, former British Prime Minister. He served for 10 years as Prime Minister of Britain and was Prime Minister at the age of 43, the youngest person since 1812 to hold that position. He now has a variety of things that he is doing in the private sector, including helping with the Middle East, and he's the quartet representative to the Middle East, among other things, and very involved in Africa, very involved in a lot of consulting work around the world, a lot of philanthropic and charitable things, particularly in the religious area. And someday, I think he aspires to go to do the highest calling of mankind, which is private equity, right? Not quite there yet, but he will get there someday. On my immediate right is a man who has shown great courage throughout his life. He grew up largely in Uganda, but came back to really lead the effort to end the genocide going on in Rwanda, and is now the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and he has been the president since 2000 and re-elected in 2010, and he's done an incredible job to revitalize that country that was torn by the genocide and has made it a place where a great deal of investment is now coming in from around the world. So, President Kagame, thank you for coming as well. To Tony Blair's left is Scott Minerd. Scott Minerd is the managing partner of Guggenheim Partners, which is, of course, the underwriter of this conference. And Scott Minerd is also one of the most distinguished investors in the world. He is the CEO and CIO of the asset management business of Guggenheim, which manages about $200 billion and is one of the leading fixed income and credit investors in the world. And Scott will tell us a great deal about how to make more money, hopefully in this panel, right? Okay? For sure. And on President Kagame's right here is the president and CEO of Chugai Pharmaceutical, Osamu Nakayama. He's had a distinguished career in the pharmaceutical industry in Japan, leading one of the largest pharmaceutical companies there. He's also most recently become the chairman of the board of Sony Corporation. And on the far left is the chief economist of Citicorp, Wilhelm Buiter. He is a man who has had an extraordinary career in the economics world. Mr. Bouter is a person who has taught at Princeton and at Yale and at Cambridge and at now, more recently, at London School of Economics, which he taught at right before becoming the chief economist for Citi. So let's start, but before we do, I just want to see how many people here are from the United States? Okay, how many people from outside the United States? How many people are in the investment world? How many people are government officials? Okay. How many people want to be in the investment world? Anybody? Anybody want to be a government official? Okay. So, Tony, let me ask you a question to start. You were in government for a long time, and now you're in the private sector. Whose promises can you believe more, politicians or business people?
You know, I think we just make them more credibly, maybe, but the result's pretty much the same. Okay. Now, I think after the financial crisis, probably we're both fairly nestling down there at the bottom of the pile. But
all right.
What do you want me to say?
Well, let me ask you an easier question.
Now that you've said to everyone, I'm aspiring to get into private equity. Right. I mean, I better recalibrate my initial response to that.
Well, let me ask you an easier question then. So you've worked with Angela Merkel, and you've worked with President Clinton and with Hillary Clinton and with Barack Obama. Who's the smartest of those people?
And I would definitely be the dumbest if I answered that question.
Right answer. All right. Well, that is the correct answer. Right. Okay, so let's talk about the Ukraine. Right now, it is rumored that the United States would like to be much more aggressive on the Ukraine than European allies would like the United States to be. And as a result, the United States, while it's announced some sanctions, hasn't gone as far, some press reports say, as the United States would like to go, in part because Europe is feeling they have a greater connection to Russia and they don't really want sanctions, the press reports say. Do you think that that is the case, that Europe doesn't want sanctions as quite as tough as the United States? And what do you think is the ultimate outcome of the Ukraine situation?
I think, first of all, that, opinion in Europe is obviously divided. Europe has a far greater economic connection with Russia, therefore the price that Europe pays in order to enforce sanctions is greater. But both the United States and Europe have an absolute interest in making sure that Ukraine cannot have its territory broken up and its integrity interfered with in this way. So even if you can have a debate about how we got here and the mistakes that were made both on the European side as well as the Russian side, right now you're in a situation where the response obviously has to be strong and clear, and I suspect that in the end Europe will line up with America on this.
Okay. Let me go to another area that you have been deeply involved in, both when you were Prime Minister and since leaving as Prime Minister, and that's the Middle East. It seems as if the talks between the Palestinians and Israel have broken down. Would you say that's correct? And do you see any chance of revival of those talks in the next couple of years, or do you think for the foreseeable future there's not going to be any prospect of a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine?
Obviously, temporarily, they have broken down. I do think there's a chance of putting it back together. I think it's essential that we do it. I think that there are big political tensions on either side that make progress at the moment hard. But, every time you look at this issue, you come back to the same thing, which is that the only solution that works is 2 states for 2 peoples. The thing about the negotiation is that however many times it breaks down, there really isn't an alternative to putting it back together again. And my view is that John Kerry's shown enormous energy and determination, commitment on this. And I think we've just got to carry on. When we did the Northern Ireland peace process, it was breaking down and the whole time. And it was, a roller coaster all of the way. But if it's important enough, you've got to keep trying. And personally, I think the issue remains extremely important in the Middle East, despite all the rest of the turmoil. And my strong advice to the US, and certainly my own role for the Quartet, is that we should stop at nothing to try and put it back together and to carry on until we make progress.
Okay. Now, you were born in Scotland, and actually you'll be you're celebrating your birthday next week, is that right?
Unfortunately.
Okay.
There's no way of getting out of it.
All right, so you were born in Scotland, and shortly there will be a vote in Scotland to separate from England. And that would be a major change in 300 years of unity between those 2 countries. What do you think will happen, and what do you think should happen?
I hope that Scotland will vote to stay part of the UK. I think that will happen. That's obviously what I believe. But it's obviously tight. And part of the trouble in today's world is that people, it's sometimes one of the great things about coming to a conference like this is you take a step back and look at the world as a whole. And in a world where you've got countries the size of China and India and the emerging markets emerging and becoming powerful, for the United Kingdom to break up would, in my view, be a regressive and very foolish view. Foolish economically, because it would do great damage to the Scottish economy, but foolish also politically, culturally, because we're stronger if we're together.
So if the United States wanted to influence this vote and convince the people in Scotland to support unity, should we say so, or should we do nothing?
You should probably do nothing. Hello. By the way, it's not entirely clear that the United States would not be more influential than the English, but that's a different issue altogether. I know, I actually think, strangely enough, I think both in respect of this and in respect to the Europe debate, provided you do it in the right way, I think it is important for people who care about my country, and we've got a strong alliance between our 2 countries, to say that Great Britain should stay great and not become small.
Okay. Well, at doing nothing, we're very good at that sometimes, so maybe we won't do anything. So, President Kagame, let me ask you, when the genocide was going on in Rwanda, do you think that the West could have done much more than it did? And did you try to get the West to do much more in Europe and the United States, or did they just didn't do as much as you thought should have been done?
Well, the international community definitely could have done much better, could have done more to either prevent it, stop it, or manage better still the aftermath. But we continue to see not so much being done in this direction. But yeah, that's, it happened that way. They could have done, and I hope, in any case, let's treat that as history, but I hope maybe lessons were learned and they could do better in other situations.
So you are from Rwanda, but you grew up largely in Uganda. You came back to lead the troops, or you were in military combat for many years, is that right?
That's right.
And did you ever think you were not going to succeed, or you weren't sure what was going to be the outcome?
Well, I was involved daily, more or less, in combat. I wasn't even sure I was going to survive to the next day. So I kept driving, though, and in mind we tried to do what was humanly possible to make sure that we carry out the duty we had to do and survive to the next day and possibly be able to win and establish a normal situation in my country.
So today, many people want to invest in sub-Saharan Africa. My own firm has raised a fund to do so. Why should people want to invest in sub-Saharan Africa? What's so appealing about investing there now?
Many things. If you look at the situation in sub-Saharan Africa today and you look at the growth that is being registered year in, year out, and the economic performance really it builds on being driven by domestic demand, that at the same time is also relating to the growing and huge middle class and urbanization, which again brings us to the fact that this growth is driven by consumption. You see it in the long term that this is going to be there. But then there are other things that can be invested in that help that as well in the long term. If you look at the needs for infrastructure, especially to support the private sector and the continued development of that, definitely this is the way this is where investments should be made.
Okay. And who are the largest investors now in sub-Saharan Africa? Is it Chinese? Is it Japanese, Europeans, Middle East, Americans? Who's really leading the effort there now?
There is, first of all, growing investments coming from within Africa itself. But we are seeing mainly Europeans, Americans also coming in. I think much better work could be done in the area of investment because the investments there are begging. They just want people to invest. And people make money, the Africans get better, and it's a situation with enormous potential.
So let's suppose I said I wanted to invest in sub-Saharan Africa, but for whatever reason, I just don't want to be in Rwanda. Is there any other country you would recommend to me? What do you think are the best countries to invest in other than Rwanda?
Well, the beauty of that is we are also involved in regional integration. So at the end of the day, if you don't invest in Rwanda, but invest in one of the countries in the East African region, more or less you're investing in Rwanda still. So okay. I would...
All right, so I can invest in several countries. Okay. Yes. So, Scott, let me ask you, you are one of the best-known investors in the United States. You've done a great job building your company from relatively scratch to $200 billion of assets under management. You're also a bodybuilder. Is there any correlation between being a... Because now I would like to bulk up more. Now, you've told me that you have bench pressed 495 pounds. I've done that over the course of my lifetime, picked up out of everything. So how does this help you be a better investor?
Well, David, I figure when I'm competing against people like Carlyle, I need as much bulk and help that I can get, right? You know, the one thing it does for me is it gives me release and perspective. And, you know, it's not commonly known, but the health effects of bodybuilding have been demonstrated now by medical research. You have a reduced incidence of cancer. You have increased flexibility. It reverses osteoporosis.
You're making me feel...
you better get out now.
I'm going to go leave right now and go weightless. So let me ask you, right now, would you say you think interest rates, let's talk about interest rates for a moment. How is the Fed going forward going to be any different with Janet Yellen versus Larry Summers? Suppose Larry Summers had been the chairman of the Fed. Do you see any real difference?
You know, it's interesting, David. I have a great deal of respect for both of them. I think Janet Yellen has a real bias toward using monetary policy as a tool to advance economic activity. I think she takes her dual mandate very seriously from the standpoint of being responsible both for inflation and unemployment. She, I believe, at the end of the day, will probably take more risk on the inflation side of the equation if she sees a benefit to raising American living standards.
Okay. So when do you think interest rates will begin to go up?
Well, I think she's made it very clear to us that we're pretty much on hold until the second half of 2015.
And you believe what government officials say, so
yeah, exactly.
That's true. Okay.
Historically, interest rates have not begun to be increased until we get to the natural rate of unemployment associated with inflation, NAIRU. And so if you look at the labor force participation rate, if you believe that some of the discouraged workers will be coming back, we could be delaying an increase in interest rates maybe into the first half of 2016.
Okay, so suppose somebody says, I happen to have $10 million I don't know what to do with. I'd like to give it to you to invest. Where would you put that money right now?
Well, at first I would have to consider the Carlyle Africa Fund.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. So that's 9.9 million of that.
Right, so if I rule that out,
okay,
just as you said with the president of Rwanda, then you know, I think the place to be is in equities in general. Even U.S. equities, for instance. The year preceding a Federal Reserve tightening has been associated with, on average, about a 20 to 30% increase in equity valuations. When you look at our multiples in the United States today, which is around 17 times earnings, historically, during periods of low inflation, the average multiple has been in excess of 19 and has been well in excess of 25 in the past. So U.S. equities look relatively cheap, but I like European equities also. I would be avoiding the emerging markets at this point, and I would seriously put some money to work in Africa. I think Africa is the greatest long-term growth opportunity in the world.
Hey, one last question right now. When Ben Bernanke was still in office, at one point he said at some point interest rates will go up, and the markets went ballistic. They really were upset. And then Janet Yellen at her first press conference said something, the markets reacted to it. Why did bond markets react so strongly to somebody saying the obvious, which is that interest rates will go up? Why were the markets so volatile in response to their comments?
Well, I think in both of those cases, the market was a little caught off guard by the timing. The perception when Dr. Bernanke made his statement was that rates were going to be, or tapering, was going to occur earlier than the market expected. It came in just as when the market expected. Right. I think Dr. Yellen made the same mistake in some ways. She indicated that rates could start to rise as early as 6 months after the end of tapering. People presumed that was a lot sooner than the market had priced for. But now the market has settled down and we're back to where the market was before.
And on balance, would you say QE3 was a good thing for our country and we spent money wisely, or was it not useful?
I'm absolutely convinced that QE1 was the appropriate thing. And I think QE2 was really the extension of QE1. I think QE3, as one Fed president stated, after sailing into deep and uncharted waters, which we have no understanding of how to return, we have opted in QE3 to sail even more deeply into uncharted waters. I think that history will show that QE3 was probably a policy mistake.
Really? Okay. So let's talk about pharmaceuticals for a moment, if we could. Today we hear the news that Pfizer is going to buy probably AstraZeneca, and there have been a lot of other pharmaceutical acquisitions. Do you think that's a good thing for consumers to have all these companies buying each other, and is that going to make better products, or is it going to make costs less than they were, or do you think this is a thing that people should be worried about when they see these companies merging at such large sizes?
Well, for the last few years, we haven't seen these consolidations, and now it's happening again. But I think the key issue is whether one pharmaceutical company can maintain critical mass of research and development investment, which I personally think the minimum $5 billion. And according to the calculation Industry Association made, it requires about $2 billion and $200 million to create a global product with the innovative mechanism. And in order for a global company to maintain the network across the world, I think probably it requires 2 products a year. And plus that these days are investing into a technology to discover the new drugs,
right?
Using the knowledge that we have gained from very famous announcement made by Mr. Tony Blair and Mr. Clinton of decoding human genome. And so that requires us a different type of investment. So altogether, making it $5 billion, which is minimum. So for those companies who like to live on innovation side, I think you can judge whether the merger is correct or not.
So do you think we're going to have any great innovations like Viagra coming forward soon, or like that? Nothing as earth-shattering as that?
We have some better ideas. All
right. So let me ask you about Japan for a moment. Obviously, pharmaceutical products are designed to make people healthier and presumably live longer, and therefore Japan should be applauded because you have the oldest population in the world in one sense. You have the average age is 45 years old in Japan. The average age in the United States roughly 36. In sub-Saharan Africa, roughly 18. And you have a higher percentage of people over 65 than any other country in the world, about 23%. The United States is roughly 13%. So is the older population that Japan has a real problem, even though it's good to live longer, but is it a problem for demographics and GDP growth and so forth, and that people in Japan worried about that, and what can be done about it?
I think the real issue is, although life expectancy in Japan has been extended to the longest in the world, but so far the healthy life expectancy hasn't caught up with the speed of life expectancy. And this is happening in the rest of the world. So it is a challenge for us how to fill the gap. And it is very important these elderly citizens are able to work so that they can make contribution into the society. And otherwise this gap will keep creating bigger spending for the nation. And I think it can be said to the rest of the world, particularly in Asia and Africa, that where the universal healthcare coverage are not quite, solidly established. There, again, the life expectancy or healthy life expectancy hasn't caught up in absence of the universal healthcare coverage.
So you're saying in the developed world, at least, we're living longer. We may be enjoying it less, but we're living longer. We may not be living as healthy as we'd like in the latter years, but okay, and maybe enjoying it as much. Let me ask you about the economy in Japan. When Prime Minister Abe came in, he quickly did some things to jumpstart the economy through his central bank, and that seems to have had some growth effects, but now the growth has leveled off a bit. Do you think that Japan has continued prospects of increasing growth, or do you think the growth is pretty much going to be where it is now?
Okay, so it's a short term, and we have just entered backlash period after the raising the consumption tax by 3%. And many people believe that consumption will come back within 3 months' time, which many analysts and economists have taken a very cautious pessimism in, while the business leaders have taken it as a very positive. And so we have to wait until the July or August come, and whether this consumption tax hike be a negative or positive for Japan. But at least this Abenomics have managed to gain confidence in investing community, and the stocks have been, prices have been going up all the time.
Right, so for people who might be here and they're looking at places to put their money, is Japan actually a good place to invest money or not such a good place, would you say?
Well, I think it's a good place to invest because if you look at the results of these strong companies posting the very positive numbers, double-digit growth on the bottom line, and so probably investors need to be a little choosy. But these are strong companies, enormous capacity of growing further.
Now, President Obama just visited Japan, you may have seen, and he went to a sushi restaurant with only 10 seats in it, and they said that sushi was the best in the world. What could be so good about that sushi that's different than what we have elsewhere? Have you ever been to that restaurant?
No, it's too expensive for me to...
Okay. So, why are economists always projecting things and they're not always right, but they don't really lose their jobs? Let me say, do you believe economists really are pretty accurate when they project where the economy is going to be 1 year or 2 years down the road?
Well, they're better than better forecasts at a 1 or 2 year horizon, but it still means they're awful, right? The reason they do this is that the desperate desire by the investing public, for anything that has any chance of penetrating the fog of the future is such that the demand, even for lousy forecasts, is open-ended. So, and I'm always ready to provide a lousy forecast.
All right. So, well, can you provide one now on what do you think the growth rate is going to be in the United States this year?
Well, forgetting about Q1, which was Frosty the Snowman's revenge, the rest of the year will be growing at 3% plus. Over the whole year, somewhat below 3% because of the lousy first quarter, and another 3% for year after that. Then it's back to potential output, which in the US is not much more than 2%, unless there are radical supply-side reforms that will return this country to being a market economy.
So we should look at somewhere between 2 and 3% unless we have completely different policies.
Well, in the medium term, after we have a cyclical recovery, there's still slack, as Scott pointed out, right? Wherever the net rate of unemployment is, we're not at it. I'm slightly more pessimistic than you are, but who knows? There's huge uncertainty.
Well, let's see if we can see some bottle of that pessimism. What about Europe? What about the growth rates there?
Well, Europe, I assume you mean the euro area. The United Kingdom is growing like a weed, right? And probably as a result of weed, most likely.
What about the rest of Europe?
The rest of Europe, obviously not enough, because while the performance there is better, we're looking at 1.3, 1.4% this year, as opposed to minus 0.3, 0.4 last year. That's a big improvement, but it's better, but still not good. It doesn't put a dent in unemployment, which in the euro area as a whole is above 12%, which in the periphery, Southern Europe, runs at 20% plus, youth unemployment in the 50s. Those are, so not enough there unless we get radical, again, radical supply-side reform and a boost to demand from the ECB focused on, I think, on the emerging, on the, I was going to say the submerging markets, but focused on the periphery of the euro area, doing what they are not allowed to do, that is direct monetary financing of their sovereigns. That won't happen, so we'll have second best demand stimulus in the euro area and subpar performance.
Right. So have you ever considered a job in diplomacy when you're in government?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, for some reason I didn't make it past the first round.
Okay. All right, so tell us about the growth rates in China. What about China?
Well, in countries like China, data and propaganda are hard to distinguish, right? So the question is the bias likely to be any greater now that we are obviously slowing down than it was before? I think we may make 7% this year. I think the risks are on the downside. Clearly, the country is an unsustainable growth model structurally, and at the moment this unsustainable model is being kept alive by excessive credit growth, by a credit bubble of some impressive proportions, and by a construction boom which makes Ireland and Spain look responsible. So at some point this is likely to lead to a sharp and short correction. Sharp and short because the construction boom isn't leveraged, unlike the European and American construction booms, and also because the Chinese government stands ready and is able to bail out its banking sector. But to do letting the air out of the credit bubble in China without puncturing it would be an achievement, as the number of countries that has managed this can be counted on the fingers of no hands.
Okay. What about, what is your view on unemployment in the United States? The unemployment rate, is it going to go down? Or are we going to be staying around 6.6?
Well, it will undoubtedly go down. If we grow at the rate that we anticipate, with this 3% rate from now on for the rest of the year and the next year, that is more than enough to put a dent in unemployment, given the poor productivity performance of the country. So that's good news and bad news. We don't know how much slack there is. Right? First, there are two dimensions. The one emphasized by Scott, there's been a massive decline, unprecedented, in the labor force participation rate, which is more than a 30-year low. Right. How much of that is structural, how much is cyclical, we do not know. Right? There could be as much as 2 percentage points that's cyclical and therefore could lead to the re-engagement of these people. But then, within the unemployed, the short-term unemployed are already at the high tension level, at the full employment level. It's the whole increment in unemployment over the natural rate is long-term unemployed. And it is certainly possible that the long-term unemployed do not exercise any downward pressure or much downward pressure on the wage bargain. So they effectively not competing for jobs. If that is the case, then we will get inflationary pressures long before unemployment hits the 5.5% that Janet Yellen and co. hope the natural rate represents. Again, we do not know. There is massive uncertainty.
So which government regulators or central bankers around the world over the last 5 years do you think have actually done the best job for their economies? Those in the ECB, those in Japan, those in China, those in the United States, or nobody?
Well, the last 5 years, of course, Japan for 3.5 of these years was abominable. Since Kuroda came in, I think it's been excellent, right? They basically shoveling it out as fast as they can, which is all they can do at this point. The Fed, I think, has done the right thing. I am one of those who believes that while there are costs to quantitative easing, rapid balance sheet expansion, at the moment, the cost-benefit analysis, basically financial stability risks versus the need to re-engage as many of the unemployed as possible, lest the unemployed become unemployable, which is that's still the right balance, but the balance is shifting. As unemployment falls, right, the cost-benefit analysis suggests an earlier increase in rates. So they did on the whole the right job for the past 5 years. Not foreseeing the crisis, but managing the crisis that they contributed to. The ECB, well, on the prevention of disaster, great. Right? Mario Draghi comes in, says whatever it takes, and here's the big bazooka in September 2012, and the fear of a disorderly breakup or disorderly sovereign default in the euro area is gone. Spreads have gone to bed. Right? In terms of conventional macroeconomic management, providing a stimulus, they're awful. Right? Unemployment is way below the self-declared target. Sorry, inflation way below the self-declared target. 0.5% for the euro area, so the target is below but close to 2%. This means that the periphery is in deflation already. And therefore, the hopes of the periphery of keeping their sovereign solvent are deeply impaired by this, something the markets don't recognize, right? The markets, as usual, are pricing the most likely outcome, and risk is for weenies. I think it's very, very dangerous. So, no, they are terrible at monetary management of the, the demand side. Disaster prevention, great, so half good.
So where do you put your money? Because you seem to like a lot of these places. Where do you actually invest your money?
I put my money under the mattress mainly, but since that's risky too, I would put it in equity mainly and in long-term illiquid infrastructure projects all over the world. And equity mainly in Europe, not in the banking sector, and selectively in the US, which I think is actually quite generously valued.
And but you forgot Citicorp stock.
Of course, I mean that goes without saying.
Of course, without saying. All right.
Wouldn't you?
Well, I don't give out my investment
neither do I.
portfolio right now. I think you can't put too much in private equity, though. That's generally my view. But okay, Tony, when you left as Prime Minister, you had obviously worked on problems all over the world. Why did you decide to focus a lot of your efforts in sub-Saharan Africa now, where you're spending a lot of your time?
Because I'm a great believer in Africa, and even nowadays when I talk about the Middle East, and then I talk about Europe, and everyone gets really down after that, and then you talk about Africa, and things seem a lot rosier. I actually think Africa is a place of enormous opportunity. There's a whole new generation of leaders there, not just leaders like President Kagame and at the political level, but in the business level, in the civic level, and the middle class is going to double in the next 5 years. Many of the fastest growing economies of the world are in Africa. It's a huge amount of investment looking to go in there now. So the challenges are big still, but I find it an exciting place to work, and it's a privilege to be there.
So have you ever looked into Mr. Putin's soul, and if so, what have you seen?
Look, I don't have problems looking into my own soul without looking into anyone else's, so I don't think...
What do you think motivates him?
He's a Russian nationalist. Look, the one thing that isn't complicated is what is motivating him. I mean, that's the not complicated part. The complicated part is what we do about it.
Okay. And in terms of the UK's role in the world going forward, what do you think position it should take? Should it continue to try to take the same military kind of role that it's had before, or will it have to downsize a bit?
Well, I hope we do, because I think for the UK, I think we have two great alliances in the world. One is with the US, and I believe that alliance is strong and should be kept strong, and it's important for us. And the other is our membership of the European Union.
What about the Commonwealth?
The Commonwealth, of course, is very important too, but it's, if you put it alongside that essential relationship with America and with Europe, these are the two pillars of our foreign policy. And look, the way countries succeed today, in my view, is through connectivity. And the way economies succeed today is through being connected. And so if you're a country the size of the UK, that's got a great history, a very good place in the geography of the world. We've got the English language. We've got these immense relationships we built up over time. I like to think of us as having the confidence to be out there and building these alliances and keeping them strong, even at risk, because partnerships are never forged in the easy times. They're forged in the hard times. One
of your successors, David Cameron, has said that he will, if re-elected, have a vote on whether or not the UK should withdraw from the EU. Do you think that would be a good thing for England to do, to withdraw from the EU, and you think it's possible that could happen?
If you have a vote on it in a referendum, it must be possible, but I think it would be a very bad idea for the UK. Look, the way the world's changing today, for us to get out of the largest commercial market and biggest political union in the way would, in my view, be crazy. I hope we don't do it. That is not to say Europe doesn't need reform. Europe does need reform, but Britain's better arguing the case and building the alliances for reform inside Europe, not outside.
One question that I know a lot of people care about a lot in the United States, will Queen Elizabeth ever abdicate in favor of her grandson? Not likely.
No, that's not the way our system. That's not the way our system works. Look, and one thing you learn as British Prime Minister is to be very careful on anything in relation to the royal family. Indeed, even now today I meet, because of course the film The Queen, even now today I meet people in the US who, after the 10 years I've been Prime Minister, they will sort of look at me and they say, were you the guy who was British Prime Minister? And I say, yes, I did like you in that movie. So, you know, I've got to be grateful to the Queen for that, and therefore not answer what are very inconsiderate questions, frankly.
All right, so one more not so inconsiderate one. It's said that she has a very good sense of humor. Can you confirm that at least, or?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Actually, let me give you a very good example that someone gave me of her sense of humor the other day, which is that there was a particular minister of mine, and when you're first appointed as a minister, you go in and you see the Queen if you become a member of the Privy Council. And this particular minister went in to see the Queen, to have the audience with her. And as they're having the audience, the minister's mobile phone starts to ring. And the Queen says to her, you better answer that, it may be someone important. So yes, she has a good sense of humor.
So you are here today presumably because you think by talking to an audience like this, you might get more interest in Rwanda and sub-Saharan Africa and so forth. What has been the receptivity you've had as you've traveled around the United States and other parts of the world to Rwanda? People know much about it, and what is the main message you try to give to people?
What I've tried, well, first of all, I have found good reception across the United States and here, even among the people who are attending this conference. And the message is simple. It's about Rwanda, it's about East Africa, it's about sub-Saharan Africa, that time is now and Africa is ready for investments in different areas as we continue to work on some of the things that make sub-Saharan Africa more attractive than it is today, and therefore be able to even have more investments. This is the story. I think it is important that the investors here and others who may be interested in doing business or investing or doing whatever else they want to do is to have correct information. I think people don't know much that has taken place in form of progress that has been in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, or even Rwanda. Well, some people may still think Rwanda is that of 15 years ago, 20 years ago when you had a genocide. But things have changed, and changed for the better, not only in Rwanda, in East Africa and sub-Saharan Africa as well.
Okay. And so do you spend a fair amount of your time going around the world actually looking for investors to come to Rwanda? Or is that a small part?
Yes, I do that. I do that. And it's the same story. Giving people the right information on which they can base to make decisions for investments. For Rwanda, again, for East Africa or sub-Saharan Africa, as much as I can, because investment in any of the countries, really, especially for Rwanda, in any of the countries in the East African region, or directly in Rwanda, has benefits across the board.
Okay. Scott, bond prices usually reflect interest rates, and when interest rates go up, bond prices typically go down.
Could I check that fact?
That's what people say. So let's assume that that is the case. It's obvious that interest rates are going to be going up. So why would people buy bonds now? Because the prices are likely to go down. Explain why you think people should still invest in fixed income products and that are likely to go down if, in fact, interest rates go up.
Well, first off, David, as you know, fixed income is not one big uniform lump, right? There are sectors throughout fixed income, whether it's U.S. government treasuries or high-yield bonds or mortgages or municipal bonds. And each of those sectors have some peculiar opportunities. For instance, bank loans today are still trading well above in terms of yields relative to their floating rate targets, where they have been historically during periods of expansion. So if you think interest rates are going up, as you've hypothesized, then...
You don't think so?
Well, nothing is, as the Prime Minister is pointing out, nothing is inevitable.
All right.
But when interest rates rise, those securities will reprice with higher coupons and are likely to actually appreciate in value. So there are sectors to go into. Asset-backed securities, municipal bonds, bank loans, I think, are three of my favorite sectors. And if you're concerned about liability mismatch at this point, a lot of pension funds in the world who were in trouble 3 years ago have gotten some relief in the equity rally. There's reason to believe that investing in long-term bonds to defease their liabilities in certain asset categories makes sense right now.
Okay. In Japan, let me ask you a question. You're the chairman of Sony. Sony was started by a terrific entrepreneur, Akio Morita. But it seems as if Japan doesn't have as many entrepreneurs as maybe we have in Silicon Valley and other parts of our country. Why do you think the Japanese business culture hasn't produced as many entrepreneurs, as many Akio Moritas, and is that a problem for Japan?
Yes, in the past, I think it has been the case. But just looking forward, I think there is a good sign of the Japanese young people setting up their new companies, and Chinese are now coming into Japan, because Japan presents the very nice venue for investors or the people, entrepreneurs, to set up new companies because of a high technology, good science, and the mild climate, and good environment and infrastructures. So I think it is important that how that we, old people like us or like me, can encourage young people to really, move to set up companies. And in Japan, in the past, the failure, we are not forgiving enough about the failures of young people. But now, even big corporations and business leaders are realizing that it is not reinventing the big industries to develop the new economy. It is very important that big companies who hold it up the 150 trillion yen as a free cash, that we should be ready to invest into these opportunities. And I think there's a sign, because now we're reaching the cliff. If we miss this opportunity of Abenomics, and
right,
we will not succeed. So I think I'm very hopeful that we'll be seeing more and more entrepreneurs.
Okay. Now, inflation is a problem that I live with. When I worked in the White House, I managed to get it to 19%. Nobody's been able to do that since.
Give it time.
I've not been invited back to government since those days. But actually, in some parts of the world, deflation is a serious problem. There's a concern in Europe, for example, about deflation. Are you worried about deflation in Europe?
Yes. Well, I shouldn't have to be worried about it, because deflation in a fiat money economy is a choice. You should only have it if you like it, right? Because as long as the monetary and fiscal authority work together, anyone with an IQ in double digits can make any inflation rate or deflation rate that they want, right? What it takes is rapid monetary expansion used to fund fiscal stimuli, helicopter money, right? You can do it, I can do it, you did it, in fact. So, the problem, and in fact, a lot of what has happened in the UK when they had QE, and in the US when they had QE, can be interpreted as helicopter money. And they're trying it now in Japan, which is why these countries are, the UK is out of deflation risk, I would say. And if there is any risk, they will revisit it. Europe is uniquely, the euro area, uniquely handicapped by the treaty, which forbids, explicitly forbids, so-called monetary financing of deficits, which is the only sure remedy against deflation when normal instruments fail. So yes, there is a risk. I think they will work up and fake it, right? They will, somehow bamboozle the German constitutional court into believing that they're engaging in, in Bundesbank-friendly policies, when in fact they are doing the ECB version of helicopter money. But it will be a delicate balancing act.
Is bamboozle an economist word, or is that just a generic?
Oh no, but bamboozle is a key economic concept.
I see. Okay. All right. So, Tony, when you were prime minister, you dealt with foreign leaders all over the world. Who were the most impressive people that you dealt with? People that you thought were really terrific in what they did and were great leaders for their country, and really were people that you thought, history should look upon favorably?
I mean, it's a little invidious to pick people out, but one group of people I think really always impressed me with their courage and determination were those leaders who came into power after the fall of the Berlin Wall and in Eastern Europe, who made the most enormous structural reforms in their countries, who often, by the way, lost power on the basis of the harshness of the reforms they were doing, which were necessary for those countries to come into the European Union. And, it's very easy, people are often very cynical about politics and politicians, but those were people who really did try to do the right thing and were prepared to pay the political price for doing it.
So let me take the privilege of the moderator's position to just conclude with a few comments, if I could. People ask me, because I'm in Washington, D.C., I live there, what is going on in Washington and why the government is somewhat dysfunctional. Let me try to say how I analogize it to people. And some of you may have heard me say this before, but I think it's still true. The most popular thing in Washington, D.C. is really not the government, but it's two animals in the zoo called pandas. Anybody ever seen a pandas? No. So there are 7 billion people on the face of the earth, but there are only 1,600 pandas. Now, the reason there's so few pandas is they're only in China, and there's poaching, and there's other problems now, encroachment on their lands. But the problem is that because of God or evolution, pandas can only mate 4 hours a day, 1 day a year. So think how few people there would be if people could only reproduce 4 hours a day, 1 day a year. So in the wild, what happens is the male panda picks up a scent from the female, and the female will say, I'll be ready in 4 weeks. And the male will pick up a scent, and he'll say, I'll be there in 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks. They get together. But because they're so inexperienced, they don't really know where the right parts are supposed to go, and they don't quite have the opportunity to do this very much. In captivity in China, the pandas are shown movies called panda porn by some about what they're supposed to do, but their eyesight isn't really that good, so they don't get the picture. And I analogize this to members of Congress. I say that members of Congress know what they're supposed to do, but they don't know how to do it some ways. And so hopefully, though I know there's some members here, and I'm sure I will be seeing some of them later, they try to do the right things, but it hasn't actually worked, and hopefully they'll do a better job than the pandas in reproducing and getting things done. Final thing I would say is that one thing I have been involved with as well is I have been involved with panda reproduction, and we did actually produce a panda recently, not anything I had anything to do with personally, but the pandas did get together for their period of time, their 4 hours, and they were fighting, so they artificially inseminated the female. Knowing that this might have to happen, they said to me in advance, would you like to see the artificial insemination? I said, I don't think so. They said, would you like to see the semen extracted from the male? I don't think so either. But it happened, and we now have a baby panda who's about 4 or 5 months old, and I hope some of you will come to see it. In May the 12th, we're going to open up in Washington the Washington Monument. And some of you may know it had earthquake damage, and it's been repaired. And I'm pleased to say I was involved a little bit in it. And just 3 things I'd like everybody to know about this, a little history lesson. The reason we have the Washington Monument is, of course, Washington died. He wasn't that popular when he died. And interestingly, here's how he died. He rode out and his troops, rode around on his horse around his plantation. And he came back dripping wet one day. It was snow. And he had guests there. And he had guests in his house all the time, because the place people wanted to stay was go to visit was Mount Vernon. And so he actually never had dinner alone with his wife for 20 years because he had so many guests. Some people say that's why they were happily married. They never actually had dinner alone together. But he came back. He didn't want to go upstairs and change in something dry, so he stayed 4 hours. He got pneumonia in effect, died. And in his will it said, don't bury me for 2 days. Now, why would that be? Well, because in those days the doctors weren't so good, and so people were often buried alive, and the coffins often had little bells in them, and you were supposed to ring the bell if you had been buried, even if you weren't really dead. And unfortunately, he didn't want to go through that. He also did one other thing that is good. He was the only founding father who freed all of his slaves. No other founding father did it, though he did it a little bit unusually. He said, "My slaves shall be freed upon the death of my wife." Well, if you were Martha Washington and you knew that the slaves knew that as soon as you were dead, so actually she freed them. The Washington Monument is 555 feet up. That's because the ancient Egyptians learned that obelisks will fall over if it's more than 10 times the size of the base. The base is 55 feet, 555 feet up. I got a chance to go up on the scaffolding outside it, and the Secretary of Interior wanted to go up with me, and I was supposed to go up the elevator. She came and she said, "No, I'm a mountain climber. I want to climb the scaffolding." And she said, I've climbed Mount Rainier 7 times. And I said, "I've flown over Mount Rainier 7 times. Anyway, with the defibrillator's help, I did get to the top. And any of you ever get to the top of the Washington Monument and look at the very top, you'll see my initials are right at the top. So when they weren't looking, I put a little graffiti in. Anyway, I hope some of you will get there on May the 12th to see it or later, and you'll see a great new Washington Monument. I want to thank all of our panelists for an excellent discussion, and thank all of you.
You've definitely got a new career.